All right, Glenna, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it. My first question that I have for you is, tell the audience, a little bit about yourself and how you started in the work that you do today.
Great, happy to. I'm going to say, I was one of those kids that always wanted to be a teacher, right? Like that's all I wanted to play with my friends. And so I always knew I was going to be a teacher. And then I had a great opportunity, almost my senior year of college, to switch over into special education and working with children with disabilities. So I got my bachelor's in special ed and moved to Utah and taught middle school students and did that for several years while I got my administrative credential and then ended up working at the State Office of Education in Utah, ultimately leading the state special ed program there. And then moved once my youngest child graduated high school, had an opportunity to move to the state of Washington, where I ran that state special ed program until President Biden appointed me to be Assistant Secretary of the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, or OSERS, at the U.S. Department of Education, which I did for 2 years. It's been a great journey, one that I think is really grounded in working as a special educator. That was my first career and really, I think, colored the way that I viewed every job that I've had since then, looking at it in the same ways that we look at disability rights and disability advocacy.
So tell me, what do you do now? Is it similar to what you've did in special education, or is it something different?
Uh, Both. I am working with Everway, which is a global neuro inclusive technology company. And so the goal of Everway is to make sure that everyone can understand and be understood. And so they focus on accessibility, accessibility in learning and accessibility in the workplace. And I am their vice president of policy. So I look at how does policy around the globe, so across the United States as well as in other countries, how do we use that to really push the rights and opportunities for everyone to have access to learning and working without having to disclose that they have a disability. But how do we just use technology and the tools that are available to us in order to be able to be included in our communities and in our workplaces?
Mm-hmm. So, and you said something about policy a minute ago. So, like, in terms of like crafting policy and all that stuff, what kind of goes on with that? How does it? So, how do you sort of address, what need to be addressed, I guess.
So I'm in a very different role now, where when I worked at the state level and when I worked at the federal level, I had the opportunity to actually write policy and implement policy. Now I serve more as like a thought leader role and a problem solver, a discussion point. So bringing people together and talking with them about what policies are already in place, what's the historical perspective behind that policy. So when we think about like our landmark, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and we think about the fact that it's turning 50 this coming year, and what started that work, that it came based on the powerful advocacy of family members of people with disabilities. I get the opportunity to share those stories, but then take it further. Where do we still have gaps? What do we need to address with the current issues that we're facing now? What is the same that we face 50 years from now? And what do we need to think about differently? And so those are the kind of conversations that I have with state leaders, with governments, as well as with individual families and educators.
Mm-hmm. So, from your perspective, what are some of the things that are sort of that need to be addressed that haven't been fully I guess, talked about or discussed, or that needs some sort of work from your perspective?
So I think that we still focus too much on a separate system and looking at how do we create opportunities for people with disabilities within that segregated system. And rather than looking at how do we design the system so that everyone has, equitable access to it. I think that IDA definitely opened the doors to schools and did a great deal. Now we have tools with the technology and the research and the evidence base that's available to us. We know how people learn. We know what type of instruction suits them. And we have easily accessible technology tools that can allow them to use and access grade level content anywhere. And so I think we really need to dig into how do we use universal design for learning? How do we redesign our education system so that they're welcoming to everyone and we don't have to create separate accommodations for people with disabilities? And then how do we use those tools to move people forward from learning in a school to learning in the workplace and being able to demonstrate that as part of a job? That's why I'm super excited about my new opportunity with Everway because they have these interoperable tools that are low cost and that can move across systems, right? And that I can use as
Mhm.
a person with a disability right next to my colleague who doesn't have a disability and is also using them in a different way. I think we really have to normalize the fact that we all can use things to be better at certain aspects of our lives, and that it's not just disability based. It's also based on preferences, it's based on upbringing, it's based on what our current job needs from us. And rather than saying, like, I only can have this because I have a disability, let's talk about how do we build a system where people just get what they need. I think now in today, like we're getting so caught up in trying to make sure that everyone is equal that we're forgetting about the fact that we all bring strengths and we all have areas of need that we need to focus on.
Hmm. How is Everway different from other companies in terms of like, addressing, disability needs or issues?
So Everway is was originally founded. Everway bought out some other companies, but the founder of one of the original companies, TextHelp, has a disability himself. He's self-disclosed that he has dyslexia, and he started the company to address the needs of his father, who had a stroke and had difficulty communicating following his stroke and returning to work. So the company was founded around disability access and disability rights and has really leaned in and done research and really explored the neurodiversity aspect of education, learning, and the workplace, and then has merged or partnered with other companies to expand. So they have different tools that help people access reading and writing, math. There's alternate standards for students with more complex needs, as well as IEP systems. Like all of those things function across systems and function along with each other to build a stronger perspective. One of the things that we haven't talked about, though, that I think is really going to revolutionize the work is AI, right?
Hmm.
And what AI brings to the personalization of learning and working. And so being able to bring in that aspect to look at, so where I can tell it, like, this is what I function best as, these are the results of an assessment that says these are the supports I need. And then it customizes a learning tool to me. Like, that is, I think, going to be revolutionary when
Hmm.
we look at how things will change going forward.
Yeah. What I want to ask is, like, what is it that other companies often miss in terms of addressing disability needs, and how does sort of Everway step in or sort of help guide them as to what they what they what they can consider in terms of, addressing, those needs.
Right. I think one of the things that most companies do, as well as colleges, right? Like once we get out of the K-12 space, is it requires some self-disclosure of a disability. And not everyone feels comfortable disclosing the fact that they have a disability, right? And I think we know that some people have visible disabilities while many others have invisible disabilities. And so we need to think about the fact that that is a personal right, that is a personal preference, what you choose to share with your employers, with your colleagues. And being able to access the tool shouldn't be predicated based on you disclosing something that is so personal to you. So I think Everway, one of the things that I really appreciate about Everway is that Everway has built the process so that it's seamless, so that their tools are available across all spaces to everyone and not only to those who have a disability. And they view it very much as like a pair of glasses, right? Like if you need a pair of glasses, like you and I are both wearing, like we
Hmm.
need them in every situation that we're in. Like we don't take them off when we leave work or we don't take them off when we leave school. No matter what we do, we need that tool with us. And that's the way Everway is approaching their tools and their resources as something that functions across systems. So you can have it on your phone, you can have it on your laptop. It knows you, it's logged in as you, and it knows what supports you need. So you're
Hmm.
not trying to navigate new systems.
Hmm. What have you learned in doing this kind of work?
You know, I this that is a fabulous question. Up until now, I spent over 25 years in public education and public education systems. So this is the first time that I haven't operated as part of a governmental entity. And what I have learned is that, and I'm not shocked by it, but what I've learned is that no matter what job I've had, I have always been surrounded by very smart, passionate people who come to work because they believe in what they're doing. Um, when I was an educator, I was surrounded by educators and leaders who really cared about education for all. When I worked at the state government, again, it was public education focused and we all had different responsibilities, but we really cared about the promise that public education makes to all students. And when I worked at the federal level, under Secretary Cardona, he adamantly argued about equity and benefits for all students, including students with disabilities and those who were English learners, those that were furthest from educational justice. Now working with Everway, people are very committed about how do we use advanced technology? How do we use AI to do the best we can do for people? People who have a variety of needs, who have diverse needs, so that they can learn better and that they can be successful in employment, doing what they want to do. It's not about saying we're only going to build tools that can be used in these types of jobs or these type of educational settings. It's about how do we build tools that everybody can use that meets their needs and helps them be successful. And that's really what drew me to Everway when they said it's about, we want everyone to understand what is being presented to them and be understood,
Hmm.
regardless of how they communicate. And I think that really speaks back to the very beginning of my career of why I became an educator.
Hmm. What have, folks that you've worked with, what have they said to you in terms of how Everway sort of helped them address, the needs of, if they have if they have disability related needs, or if if they know someone, whether if it's like a friend, family member that has special needs, what has the community response been like with Everway?
It has been overwhelmingly positive. So, like I said, Everway formed from a variety of other companies. And so people are very interested. They're like, oh, Everway, we haven't heard of that. But when I talk about the tools, that it was started as text help, right? It was started around a tool called Read and Write or UPAR. They're like, oh, we use that. We have states like Arkansas that provide those tools to every student K-12, right? And we just saw some amazing research come out of Arkansas showing the results of having those tools available and the impact on literacy. We also have a company that was called N2Y that had the unique learning system, which is a curriculum for students with complex needs. And there are teachers that get on social media and talk about how it is life changing for the students that are accessing it and how it makes their job easier for planning and providing instruction that's aligned to the standards. One of the things that I've advocated for and pushed for my entire career is that just because someone has a disability doesn't mean that they can't access the grade level general ed curriculum. And there is not a place for us to decide that someone shouldn't have that access. That's the whole purpose of public education is to have access to that grade level curriculum. And then the specialized instruction comes in to figure out how to get it to them, right? What's the best way to do that? And so Everway makes that process more seamless and more easy. And then again, in those other settings in higher ed, in colleges and universities, in trade schools, in the workplace, that you don't have to disclose your disability if you don't want to.
Mm,
You know, one of the things that I haven't shared is that I'm a person with a disability. I was identified as having a speech language impairment. Many years later, it was identified that I have a hearing impairment. And I consistently, even to this day, have to advocate for my accommodation needs, which is kind of funny because I can use AI captions, right?
mhm,
Like there are easily available free tools out there that let me have my needs met. But people still aren't used to that. They want to know what I'm doing with my phone, why I'm running captions, what I'm going to do with that information. And so we still need to go so much further around making the world accessible to everyone, right? Whether we're talking about sidewalks with curb cutouts, whether we're talking about running captions, whether we're talking about setting up meetings where everyone can understand and communicate in whatever style they need, whether it's sign language, whether it's using AAC, whether it's speaking, right, or writing. There are so many ways that we can build these systems. We just have to take a step back and do it. And
mm,
I think now's the time that we can get it done.
mm-hmm. And yeah, which I can relate to the to all the points that you're saying, especially sort of the transition from, special ed to regular ed, because I went through that, and so I was before I was in special ed, and now I was kind of more in regular ed classes, and so I kind of had to really advocate for myself, not just through K through 12, but also through college.
Mhm.
Yeah, so something I can relate to. Finally, to wrap this up, how can other I just want to know, like, what can organizations, what tips, advice would you give to organizations that are thinking about um creating companies geared toward disability, toward accessibility? Because I think starting your own company is it's not that easy.
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the things that I think is so powerful is that we have to remember like nothing about us without us, right?
Hmm.
Which is the age old like disability advocacy saying of don't make policy about people with disabilities, don't make tools for people with disabilities, don't create jobs or employment for people with disabilities without actually talking to the people that you are creating for, letting them be part of the planning, letting them be part of the design, letting them provide open and honest and authentic feedback about what's trying to be done. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about Everway. There's a neurodiversity employee resource group where they are interviewing people, they are asking for feedback, they are using that feedback to make changes in the processes. And so when companies are looking at how are we employing people with disabilities? What is our process? Are they including those people in examining those processes and identifying how they will work? We have to make sure um, that people with disabilities are through all layers of the company, right? From the top leaders all the way down to your part-time personnel. And how do you model that? I'm trying to be very intentional about talking about the fact that I have a disability and what I've learned from it, right? Like there are barriers that I have had to surpass. There are also some tremendous strengths that I bring because of my disability. And despite that, right, like it really provides an opportunity when I disclose that I have a disability to talk about biases that people have around people with disabilities. And so you have to be able to engage in those conversations. And those can be really tough conversations when you're talking about biases that people hold about people with disabilities. And so companies need to be ready to navigate all of that. I will say Everway works with some fabulous companies that have built different pathways for people with disabilities. We've done webinars with them. We actually have one coming up soon around neurodiversity, but we've also partnered with Disability In, which really is a strong support around employment.
Yeah, I've heard of disability and kind of their work. Yeah. All right.